Hey there, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters, coming to you live from Austin Powers' apartment. Yeah, baby. But in reality, I'm still staying in Kyiv, and I have news to share, specifically about the Russian coming offensive, or some of the Ukrainian talking heads are actually stating that that offensive has begun. Indeed, we're seeing some of the statistics and some of the reports from the analysts and just general media people from the Ukrainian armed forces, such as the commanders and generally important people talking about that Russians have been regrouping all this time past their previously, I wouldn't say really succeeded, but and also not really failed offensive, but the offensive that Russians did over the last year that achieved very limited results. And right now, they are supposedly regrouping and are going to be attacking both in the north, around the Sumy region, around the east and northeast, around Liman, and also towards the Pokrovsk, maybe trying to take the city once again. However, Ukrainian troops are reporting that they are ready and they are prepared to fight. We see statistics of Russians slowly increasing that offensive potential. But so far, it's been very limited increase, and we haven't really seen a lot of that offensive potential coming forward. The only thing that we've seen is Russians using a lot of their ground forces, like infantry-based fighting groups that try to sneak into the Ukrainian position, moving like all across the front line by using groups of 3 to 4 to 5 people from different directions at the same time, which is just problematic for Ukrainians to deal with because of the way that the front line is currently set up. But so far, it is very hard to say where specifically Russian kind of main thrust of the attack will come forward. There are some priority directions, but I'm going to cover those once I get back to Denmark. And General Syrski talks about that extensively in his latest big interview. I'm going to leave a link to the interview in description. You can translate the whole page and read it. It's quite interesting. But here are the main things that he talks about. Firstly, he talks about the Russian offensive and that he is considering that the offensive that Russians were planning has already begun, and that the artillery ratios actually right now are relatively comparable. Russians are still having the advantage, but they're not having the absolutely dominant, overwhelming advantage over Ukraine. Moreover, right now, the drones are what is taking over a lot of the front lines, and this is where I can actually share some of my experience. Over my time stay here in Kyiv, I've met with a lot of the people from the military that are actually working on the front lines, and I can share some information about the current situation with drones. Now, there are big issues with drones because both the offensive operation and defensive operations are conducted via drones. I think everyone knows it by this point. What we don't know about is how this all is shaping the war at all. For example, that a lot of the Ukrainian operations and movement and logistical operations are trying to find the time to move when the drones cannot be active, because if it's a clear night, then usually there are night drones that are hunting their targets, so you cannot just easily move around night. Daytime, that's basically suicide. Then there are issues with the optical fiber guided drones, the drones that have this fiber optics cable that is transmitting the signal from the drone. While initially they were considered to be really interesting technology that allows to fly drone without being susceptible to electronic warfare systems, now that there has been used a lot of this, the fiber optics that are just stacking on top of each other are actually creating a lot of issues for the infantry operations, because it's thin strips of wires that are basically all across the fields everywhere in Ukrainian front lines, so it's very hard to move through them. And it also creates issues to fly the other types of drones and through them, because those fiber optic cables is very hard to see in the drone video perception because the resolution is relatively low. And more than that, now the additional discovery was that now by using some of the essentially lighting up some of these wires, you can actually trace them to where the drone operator position, where they're launching those fiber optic drones from. You can actually trace it this way. So there are more nuances that are coming now online with the drone operations, but generally speaking, right now now both offensive and defensive operations are fully dependent on these close-range drones. And right now, there are still no concrete weapon that can deal with them. The best solution that Ukrainians are using so far are just actually hunting rifles with a small buckshot. Syrskyi then continues talking about what should Ukraine do going forward, and he talks about that it's mostly important for Ukraine to become self-reliant. He's stating that a lot of the work has been done during the last year to make sure that Ukraine is able to sustain its operations in defense against the Russians on its own without the help from the allies, knowing that allies might not be fully reliable. And that is great to hear that Ukrainians are really looking to not be at least critically dependent on their allies. Great news indeed. Beyond that, there has been a discussion in the interview about the stalled front line that supposedly the Zaluzhny, when he was leaving the office of a commander-in-chief, he stated that there has been like essentially a stalemate on the front lines, to which Syrskyi is parrying, saying that it is true that potentially there is some kind of a slow-moving front line. However, you cannot call it fully stalling because the Kursk operation existed and we were able to execute quite a big operational maneuver. So what he's stating basically here is that despite what it is happening on the front line, it is important to realize that there are possibilities for these kind of operations being planned and executed. Important to note is that it seems that Russia is not really looking to create any kind of these operational scenarios with fast-moving advances and capturing large swaths of territory. Instead, they want to continue executing their slowly moving, crawling advance and more of a exerting like psychological and political pressure on Ukraine in a sense that, Russia is constantly advancing. And we're going to cover this topic in a video once I go back. The drone increase is spectacular. Syrskyi underlines there is going to be even more drones coming to Ukrainians, and I can guarantee you that. He was asked with regards to numbers of mobilized Ukrainians. He didn't really make any comments and statements around this, but the reports from the front lines that we hear in Ukraine are actually quite good. There seems to be a situation with the manpower for Ukrainians improving. It's not fully equalized yet, it's not good yet, but it's definitely much better than it was before. So it's again, we have some great news that Ukraine is solving probably one of their biggest problems that they had previous year overall. Additionally, Zelensky and general political groupings around the Ukrainian government are considering introducing new laws that will solidify some kind of a potential for rotation of the military personnel. This is another big problem that Ukrainians are trying to tackle because the guys on the front line has been fighting now basically for years. And talking with some of the guys from the front lines, you can see that they're just, exhausted morally and physically and in all other ways. So they would definitely benefit from a certain ways of rotating towards the safer areas of Ukraine for a lengthier period of time rather than just a couple of days. Then he also stated that there are issues with the Ukrainian commanders, something that he has been personally criticized for. And he talks about that they are trying to replace those commanders that are causing issues. Now, this is a 50-50 statement because, as I said, he has been criticized himself. But overall, we see that there are changes in the Ukrainian command, and we see a lot of good names coming in to take over that command. The critics of Syrskyi obviously address everything that is being done to Zelensky, but I think that it's not as simple as that. And then at the end, he talks about the coalition of the willing and the European allies supposedly sending their troops to Ukraine post-peace talks. Now, you already know my position that peace talks are complete nonsense, and this is just public statements to stroke Trump's ego. But in reality, we see that even the coalition of the willing should be probably renamed to a coalition of the no balls. Because the news that are coming in is that there are extreme wavering of the coalition of the willing because there is no US support. My question to that is, how can you call yourself a coalition of the willing if you are not willing to do something because there is some other party like US not willing to do something? Because then you are not willing, you're just nonsense. And the reports are that there's essentially 6 countries only that are ready to supply their troops. And again, I'm going to underscore this, post some kind of a ceasefire agreement, so not even now. No, we're talking about that if there is some kind of bullshit ceasefire agreement negotiated, then potentially UK, France, the Baltic nation, and another nation that doesn't want to be named, no joke, are the only ones that would want to supply troops to Ukraine. It's a complete joke. It's non-serious. So to be honest, I am getting extremely annoyed that we're still treating this like it's some serious matter. We shouldn't be treating that there's going to be any ceasefire coming soon. We should be focusing on doing things that can actually help Ukraine. And while I'm extremely frustrated with this coalition of the lack of balls, I am very happy to see that the things that needs to be done are actually being done. There has been recently a Ramstein meeting where there was a lot of nations that came in to discuss the support for Ukraine, and they have agreed for over 21 billion euros of military aid for Ukraine, which is significant amount of help that's going to be coming to Ukraine this and the coming years. This is what is needed, right? So let's put the kind of like the bottom line after this. All of these coalition of the willing, all of these political talks, all of these dances is complete nonsense. What Ukraine needs is a hard support, weapons, money, and training. Those are the things that would be really beneficial to Ukraine. So despite my frustration with the coalition talks, the peace talks, the everything else that is complete nonsense that Putin rejected already many, many times, we see that at least the European countries are doing the right thing by supporting Ukraine long term. But talking about people that are still trying to play pretend game, here I want to show you the U.S. Representative Manworm Witkoff, who came to Putin to meet him. And what I want you to pay attention here is just how giddy he is that he's gonna meet this bloody dictator, this person that brutalized the neighboring country and actually his own country and his own population for many, many years now, causing unimaginable suffering both for Russians and Ukrainians, bizarrely. And then we have the representative of the Americans coming here and just being like, oh, look at this, like I'm gonna meet this amazing person, look how giddy he is, how happy he is to see him. Incredibly, absolutely pathetic that this is what US has become. If the most powerful nation comes here and then the representative of that nation is just almost ready to bow down to Putin and lick his boots, I don't even know how this should get Putin to start thinking that what he is doing is potentially not the right way forward. Zelensky talks about the Chinese troops that were captured. Now, it's important why this story is underscored. This is because Zelensky is obviously wary that more Chinese people will sign up, and he would like to see Chinese government to restrict Chinese troops and Chinese nationals to sign up to fight for the Russian army. But importantly, this doesn't yet mean that China is sending their full-fledged military force to fight for the Russian side. Right now, the noise that they're hearing is only to try to prevent more Chinese nationals joining, and hopefully a Chinese government will do something. Now, Estonia is doing something indeed. Just right now, Estonia has seized one of the Russian Shadow Fleet tankers over the false flag violations. And again, it's a great step. I think the movement of any shadow fleets should be prohibited in any national waters of the NATO countries, because again, Russia is at war with the NATO countries, so at least this should not be happening on everyday basis, as this is not serious. Estonia states that they reached out to the owner of this tanker, like the registered country of this tanker, and it turned out that supposedly this tanker was not actually registered in their their country. So it's unclear whether or not this is just like a flag that they put on the tanker and the actual registration papers are just faked. That's what Russia is doing. It's pretty blatant, and even the surface level check can get you the full picture of what Russia and how Russia is operating with their shadow fleet. Then there is the interesting article that looked into how the German equipment is performing, and I think it's quite interesting. So if we read the summary, so the Panzerhaubitze 2000 artillery recognized as effective, but it was vulnerable to wear and tear, so it questions its combat reliability in a longer warfare. The Leopard 1A5 tank considered reliable, but its armor is too weak, so it's often used as a makeshift artillery rather than a tank, so essentially drive in and just fire some shells at the enemy. In the case of Leopard 2A6, one of the later variants of Leopard tanks, repairs are too complicated to be carried out directly on the front, so the tank suffers the downtime when it needs to be repaired. The Iris-T anti-air system is a highly accurate air defense, but it is expensive to operate and there are shortage of ammunition being produced. The Patriot is recognized and is an excellent system, but its use is limited due to outdated MAN chassis, the truck that is carried on, for which there are no spare parts. Mars MLRS systems from Germany has been outlined as an actual game changer that is able to fire a lot of the rocket artillery from it due to it, but the range is pretty long. However, unfortunately, it cannot use the US cluster munitions like the US systems like HIMARS. Then the Gepard system, which is basically a turret with a lot of rapidly firing machine guns and some missiles, have been outlined as one of the best systems performing in this type of warfare, shooting down aerial targets, and Ukrainian military considers to be them the most reliable, effective, and favorite systems, despite the fact that the Bundeswehr had long ago written them off. These systems were returned to service and even purchased additional ones from abroad. So super important. I'm really hoping that Germany will start making them once again. But the problems are not only in technology. The training of Ukrainian military in Germany was too short, which led to a lack of knowledge in the field maintenance and repair for the vehicles. The logistics of repair and delivery of spare parts are difficult because the infrastructure at the front is lacking. The repair hubs and the main repair hubs are located far from the combat zone. The conditions in Ukraine are extreme, and that is what causes accelerated wear and tear into equipment, which is kind of hilarious phrase to say because that's the war. So the wear and tear is the thing that you should be thinking about the war and how you should maintain your vehicles in a long war under very, very extreme conditions. And I want to end this video with a very special message. Hey, Georgie from a truck here. Stop touching me in inappropriate places. Hey, Georgie from a truck here, being molested sexually here. Guys, you asked me for a shout out and a call for a person that you haven't seen for a while. And you see him now.
Hi.
Hi, say hello, Brandon.
Yeah, I'm still there, or here, or whatever it is. It's all relevant. I paid for dinner. Georgie's paid for dessert. It was very nice. And I got him to come for a ride in my white van.
Anyway, yeah, he put me in his big white van and we're driving along Kiev. So you wanted me to shout out for Brandon. Brandon, what you doing? Why do you need a shout out?
Because I need money. If I was a billionaire, you'd never hear of me.
Money for what?
Hotels, Matrice, and Mavic drone components. We've got it down to the point. If you've ever fundraised for a Mavic, $3,000 to $5,000, depending if it's thermal, we buy the components. We can repair them for a fraction of the price, a fraction of the price. And now it's come to the point where we can even repair components of components, if that makes sense. So you might have a motor gone, like a yaw motor. We don't even need to replace the motor anymore because 8 out of 10 times it's just one strip. It takes $10,000 to $20,000 an order. It takes about 2 months, but we get it. And for that, we can repair about $200,000 worth of drones. Makes sense to me.
Yes. So let's help Brandon out, guys. I'm gonna link everything in the description. Let's help Brandon. Slava Ukraini, guys, and I love you, and I'll see you next time.
I love you more, Georgies.